Now looking back at the Women's Series weekend in Milton Keynes, and a bit of history for the first time in Women's Series history, we've had a weekend of events where not one player has picked up multiple titles. We had four different winners across the four events, Bo Greaves and Mikuru Suzuki adding to their title tallies, and in between those two we had two first-time winners in Rhiannon O'Sullivan and Robin Byrne. But what did you make of the weekend's action in Milton Keynes?
Well, I mean, first, have to give a shout out to the two first-time winners. Rhiannon beating the almost unbeatable Bo Greaves in the final, beating as well Trina Gulliver, who won a title a couple years ago in the semifinal. A really good day for Trina Gulliver. For Rhiannon, she's been threatening for some time. She's up to fifth in the averages so far across the two weekends, and isn't that far off of Lisa Ashton for fourth. But to finally cross the line and win a title, I have to say it's deserved. And one that, well, if it weren't for the fact that Bo Greaves until this past weekend, it seemed almost unbeatable, would otherwise say it was coming. Rhiannon O'Sullivan had put herself in that position too often to not eventually cross the line. But based on, the fact that Rhiannon O'Sullivan has been unbeatable, you might not have thought it would happen. But it looked like it was going to happen. It finally did. For Robin Byrne, she's also been putting herself in that position. She made it to a final against Bo Greaves, couldn't win a leg earlier this year. Other than that, she'd gone out a few times to three times actually to Fallon Sherrick so far this year. But that title, it might have come a bit as a surprise. And she wasn't the best player in that event, but she did the right things at the right time. Other than one match against Corinne Hammond, she was never pushed to a last leg decider. And that match against Corinne Hammond was her best performance statistically, averaging 85. She also beat Lisa Ashton, Laura Turner, who's made a bunch of finals now, not this year, but over the last couple years. And it was a huge performance because it really solidified her chance to get to the Winter Gardens in 2 months' time. But the thing I really want to talk about is not the winners per se, but it's just the quality and the level that is now at the top of the game. I want to take us back 2 years ago to the second weekend in 2021. Yes, it was a shorter season. Yes, there was the pandemic. So it was still more difficult to travel and play. So in a way, players weren't overall as sharp as they might be now playing more often, not just in the PDC, but in other competitions. But if you look at, and I will add, there were fewer players. There were only 66, 67 players in each event compared to the 100 that there were this past weekend. But there were also 6 events. So you had an additional 2 events to look at from the second weekend in 2021. Across that weekend, only 4 players averaged over 90 in a match, a total of 17 times for those 4 players. 8 for Fallon Sherrick, twice topping the ton, 7 for Lisa Ashton, and 1 apiece for Dita Hedman and Mikuru Suzuki. This past weekend, across only 4 events as opposed to 6, we went from the 17 from 2 years ago up to 28, and from 2 ton plus averages to up to 7. We went from 4 players averaging over 90 to 6, and we went from just the 1 who averaged over a ton to 4. 4 players averaged over a ton this weekend. In addition to Fallon Sherrick, this time Bo Greaves did it 4 times, and once apiece for Rhiannon O'Sullivan and Lisa Ashton. For the 90-plus averages, 10 apiece for Fallon Sherrick and Bo Greaves. That includes the 90-plus ones. 3 for Mikuru Suzuki, all en route to the title in the final event. 2 apiece for Rhiannon O'Sullivan and Noah Lynn van Leuven, and just the 1 for Lisa Ashton. The ton-plus was her only 90-plus as well. But just that the number of times players are averaging over 90 has skyrocketed. The ton-plus averages has skyrocketed. And that has been what we were saying when the PDC first announced the Women's Series a few years ago, that the more the PDC puts on these events, and the more often these players are able to play in what is, in essence, a professional environment, the better they will get. They will push each other. They will make each other play better. And yes, there are still players who are quite a bit behind the 6 names I mentioned now, but a few other players as well. Yes, those players are still not as consistent as the top players, even on the Challenge Tour. But they're getting closer. They're pushing themselves. They're improving each time, each weekend. And this weekend showed that. This weekend showed that there are a number of players who can play at what the level that we take for granted that Bo Greaves will play at is not just 1 or 2. It's 8, 9, 10, 11. Yes, they don't do it as often as Bo. Yes, it means the fact that they don't do it as often means Bo Greaves is still going to win, even on a bad weekend, 1 title. On a fairly bad weekend, probably 2. But the number of players who can push her keeps going up. And we'll look back in 2 years from now, and I'll say, remember 2 years ago, there were 28 90-plus averages? Well, now there's 40, 45. That is what's going to happen as these players continue to push each other. And this weekend, we saw it, and we saw at least that first step where we're seeing new players like Noah Lynn Van Leuven be able to challenge even Bo Greaves, even Fallon Sherrock at the top of the game.
That is why you are the darts statistician. No, it's great to see. And just firstly, touching on that race for the Women's World Match Play, we have got one more weekend before the cut-off, but it's interesting to see that the 4 title winners, they are at the top of that list, and they're going to be 4 debutants. They weren't in the field for the first stage of the Women's World Match Play last year, so it's good to see more names coming through. And it was a really interesting weekend, and it started off, as you touched on it there, some might have predicted, with Bo Greaves winning the first title, posting those big averages that you mentioned as well, the 106, 97, a 101, then a 94 in the final, and beating 2 of those big names, Lisa Ashton, Fallon Sherrock, in the last 2 games. And she was going on a tear in the second event as well, 4 90-plus averages to start, followed by an 88, another win against Fallon on the way to reach another final. And there she was stopped in her tracks by Rhian O'Sullivan. And you've just heard from Rhian on the show, and she mentioned about how many times in the past year she's gone on these deep runs in events, and it has more often than not been Bo Greaves that stopped her quite often. But this time it was Rhian who came out on top. And I spoke before about there being a big 4 in the ladies' game with Bo, Makuru, Lisa, and Fallon. Well, I think now you've got to include Rhian O'Sullivan in that conversation now, and not just for beating Bo in the final, but the way she did it as well. The 114 finish in the first leg to break, and Bo came back at her to lead 3-2, but then to hold in 14 darts and then punish those mistakes from Bo in the crunch time of the game, the 7th leg to break for 4-3, and then put in a strong leg, 16 darts to hold to get over the line to win that title. And this is a player that started the weekend, first game, 100-plus average to beat Makuru 4-0. And, okay, Rhian's not posting those high 80s, 90s, 100 averages as frequently as a Bo or a Lisa or a Fallon. Those 4 are top of the overall averages on Dart Connect, but you can see the quality that she has. And she spoke about it earlier with us about just how important that title win was for her, and who knows what it could now lead to, because I think she is establishing herself as one of the ladies to beat and one of the top ladies in the game. So I certainly think there's more to come from her. And these last 12 months or so, we've seen her start to enter more events. She's often playing on the WDF circuit. She's committing to the Women's Series as well, and I think we're seeing that extra competition for her is bringing her game on, and she is closing that gap. And when she came back to start playing more on the circuit a year or 2 ago, the gap between then and now from her to the top players, that's shrunk for me. And I think she's won more Women's Series titles than Lisa and Fallon combined this year, so that shows you how well she's doing. And a word on a few of the other winners as well. Makuru in that second spot on the Women's Series order of merit after that title, so looking in a good position to maybe get back to Ali Pali this year. And again, someone that is producing some of those big averages. There was a 98 against Fallon in one of the games, and then in the final against Noah Lynn Van Leuven, digging deep to win that one when she wasn't at her best. And just lastly, Robin Byrne, fair to say that the most surprising of the 4 winners at the weekend, but again, a well-deserved title for her. And as you mentioned, she's made finals in the past, someone that we picked out last week that was well in the race for Blackpool. And I'm sure when you are that close to it, it is hard to put that to the back of your mind, especially when you get to a final and you're not playing one of the big names, if you like, the top 4, top 5. The difference between winning and losing that final, it could be the difference between getting to that Women's World Match Play. So, yeah, that was a big win for her, and kicking off that final against Laura Turner with a 13 darter, then winning that scrappy second leg, getting that early break, I think just gave her that bit of breathing space to go on and win it pretty comfortably in the end, 5-1, and she's now looking in a very strong position to get to the Winter Gardens.